Sophisticated, with strong business structures and, above all, low profile, members of the Albanian mafia have managed to camouflage themselves in Latin America over the past few decades to become one of the main distributors of cocaine in Europe. They arrived in the region in the late 1990s and early 2000s, following the fall of communism in Albania and the Balkan Wars, according to a recent report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, GUI-TOC. Today, they have contact with cocaine growers in Peru, cocaine manufacturers in Colombia, groups that transport drugs to Ecuadorian ports, and powerful Mexican cartels, according to experts consulted by Bloomberg Linea. Albanian clans united by family ties. The Albanian Mafia is just one of the Balkan groups with a presence in Latin America, supplying Europe with cocaine. There are reports of Bosnian, Montenegrin, Kosovar, and Serbian clans, says Victor Sanchez, an organized crime expert and researcher at the Autonomous University of Coahuila in Mexico. Thanks to the diaspora that resulted from the conflicts that erupted in the Balkans in the 1990s, members of these groups have spread to major European cities and are present in 5 major ports: Algeciras and Valencia in Spain, Hamburg in Germany, Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and Antwerp in Belgium. But they also have influence in the Latin American ports, from which drugs are shipped to the old continent, including Esmeraldas and Guayaquil in Ecuador, Buenaventura in Colombia, and Callao in Peru. The expert points out that one particularity of the Albanian Mafia is its largely family-based structure. You join the Albanian Mafia as a son, nephew, cousin, or relative of one of its members. Since it is made up of people with blood ties, it is more difficult for them to report or provide information against the clan, says Sanchez. This characteristic, which the Albanian Mafia and the Italian 'Ndrangheta share, is why they have been difficult to dismantle, unlike other European criminal structures such as the Cosa Nostra and the Camorra. Albanian gangs are also very sophisticated in business, says Luis Cordova Alarcón, director of the Order, Conflict and Violence Research Program at the Central University of Ecuador. The Albanian Mafia, or at least the groups that operated from Ecuador, did this with well-established business structures that allowed them to camouflage drug trafficking in transport and storage companies, as well as in the shipping companies that export, explains Cordova. The expert shows how Drejtan Gjika, an Albanian drug trafficker captured last May in the United Arab Emirates, created, between 2010 and 2012, a series of companies in Ecuador linked to banana exports, with the aim of sending cocaine to Europe through them. At that time, during the Rafael Correa administration, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock created a system for allocating weekly banana export quotas based on the number of hectares planted, called Unibanano. But the system was only audited in 2022 with funding from the German cooperation. The audit revealed the existence of more than 50 ghost companies, established only on paper, but which held the aforementioned quotas. What does this mean? That there was absolute impunity and protection. An entire department of the Ministry of Agriculture was involved in drug trafficking, says Sanchez, the organized crime expert, citing national press reports on the subject. The Albanian group's experience in money laundering has allowed them to maintain good relations with Mexican cartels, and their low profile has allowed them to avoid attracting the attention of local authorities, says Mike Vigil, former director of international operations for the DEA. They always keep a very low profile because they know very well that encouraging violence is not good for business, Vigil says. Concern about the Balkan mafias has spread to the United Nations, which, during the presentation of the World Drug Report 2025, denounced the increase in drug-related violence in Europe. The violence and competition that characterize the illegal cocaine market, once limited to Latin America, are spreading to Western Europe as organized crime groups from the Western Balkans increase their influence in the market, the United Nations said. Why the Albanian Mafia gained ground in the region. The success of the Albanian mafia in Latin America is due to three factors: the lack of competition from local organizations, the oversupply of cocaine in the region, and the demobilization of the FARC in Colombia, which fragmented the illegal drug trafficking industry. 1. Negotiate instead of confront. The Albanian mafia does not engage in confrontation. It cooperates with local mafias. In Mexico, they cooperate with both the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, says Sanchez. And in Colombia, Albanian mafia members maintain ties with organizations like the Gulf Clan on the Caribbean coast, while also maintaining ties with FARC dissidents on the Pacific coast. The same goes for the connections that Balkan groups maintain in countries such as Peru and Ecuador. The criminal relationships between Western Balkan citizens and small producers in Peru or local gangs in Ecuador are strong, in part, because they need each other equally. Sanchez adds, one indication that the Albanian mafia is not seeking to expand its territory and displace local gangs is that it does not have armed forces in Latin America. In fact, it establishes business relationships through messengers or emissaries who travel temporarily from Europe, unless they have legal problems and seek to establish a permanent presence in the region. Messengers are independent and work with multiple organizations. Emissaries are selected individuals within a criminal group and must meet specific criteria to qualify as representatives of the group in South America. The GITOC report says, both messengers and emissaries must have certain skills, Sanchez says. What are they? Speaking several languages and having expertise in money laundering allows them to explore new business opportunities and offer their services to groups in Colombia, Ecuador, and Mexico, strengthening their relationships. 2. There is room for many people. Another factor that has allowed the Albanian mafia and Balkan groups to position themselves as cocaine traffickers is the increase in the consumption and production of this drug. In Europe, drug use has increased by 80% since 2011, and worldwide, the number of users has increased from 17 million in 2013 to 25 million in 2015-2023, according to the latest report from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC. As demand for cocaine has increased, so has supply. Between 2022 and 2023 alone, production potential increased from 2,757 to 3,708 tons, although growth has continued over the past decade. Third, fragmentation in the drug trafficking chain. The controversial demobilization of the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, AUC, in 2006, and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, in 2016, fragmented the drug trafficking chain, according to the GITOC report. Fragmentation has led, among other things, to making organized crime structures more horizontal than hierarchical, more like a system of interconnected nodes. In the context of this dynamic, the Albanian mafia has gained a foothold in Latin America. In line with the GITOC, Vigil argues that the vacuum left by the FARC and the disunity among other armed groups in Colombia in particular created opportunities for drug traffickers in the Balkans. Vigil adds that the Albanian mafia has mastered the connection with South American society, marrying local women, for example, and forging documents, using multiple identities to avoid detection by the authorities. Ecuador, the key to Balkan groups. Ecuador is perhaps the Latin American country with the largest number of emissaries and messengers of the Albanian mafia, as well as several leaders of Balkan groups. A concrete case, Dritan Rexhepi, leader of the Bello Company. Rexhepi arrived in Ecuador in 2012, after escaping 3 prison sentences in Europe, and 2 years later was captured in the Balkan operation, which took place in Duran, Samborondon, and Guayaquil. The paradox is that from prison, he consolidated the power of his organization in Latin America. Rexhepi was released from prison in Ecuador in 2021 after an early release, and despite 2 approved extradition requests in Albania and Italy, although in November 2023 he was captured in Turkey with a Colombian passport. The early release was denounced by former assemblyman and presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio, who was assassinated on August 9, 2023, who in a report also exposed to the public how the Albanian mafia infiltrated the national police. This report alleges that former National Police Commander Tanja Varela was recruited by the Albanian mafia and worked in its service when she was commander of the police zone corresponding to the province of Manabi. Villavicencio even uncovered the connection between another Albanian drug lord, Dritan Gjika, and businessman Ruben Cheres, a friend of former President Guillermo Lasso's influential brother-in-law, Danilo Carrera. Balkan groups have corrupted many officials and security forces in the region, says Vigil. But before Balkan groups infiltrated Ecuador's institutions, there was an element that allowed their members to enter and settle in the country. The fact that Rafael Correa's government exempted citizens from around the world from visa requirements in 2008, allowing them to stay in the country for up to 6 months. Those who had legal problems in Albania or Europe could find Ecuador as a kind of safe haven, and this led to a greater deployment of mafia emissaries. The truth is that today, there are at least 7 Balkan groups operating in Ecuador and South America: the Albanian Bello Company, the Faruku clan, and the Lazarati clan, the Saric group, Serbia, the Kotor clan, Montenegro, and the Tito and Dino clan, Bosnia.